Welcome to the Real Estate 401k Show. Here are your hosts, Ryan Gerdes, Mike Weinstein, and Justin Frederick, helping you build a legacy of wealth through real estate. Powered by the Recon Group at West USA and the Frederick team with Fairway Mortgage. NMLS number 625918.
Boy, you guys are lucky again today. We got another good one here without Mike Weinstein. He's off doing fall break stuff with his kids. So
the energy's just so good.
I know. we don't have to sit here and just listen to him talk just to talk.
or watch him read.
Yeah, just be the only one drinking bourbon.
I hope you're watching this, Mike.
I really hope he is. It's not any surprise. A market 2 years ago where everyone was putting their home up on the market and it was selling for $100,000 over list price, and they were getting 15, 20 different offers in 24 hours. That's never a market that sustains, ever.
No.
So the whole what goes up must come down idea. But I want to talk a little bit about what happens when we start to see market shifts, because people panic just by nature whenever something changes, especially if it changes at all negatively.
Oh, yeah.
So sellers are not getting to be as greedy. Sellers are having to wait a little bit more time. They're having to do a few more things to their property in order to make it more marketable. Whereas before, we could put out a cardboard box and it was $100,000 and it was like
no inspection,
no low balls. I know what I got.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the financial side real quick. Like, what type of tendencies do you see, and what kind of writing on the wall do you start seeing over there on the financial side when
markets churn?
Right.
So you tend to get a little bit more difficult of buyers, meaning credit may have some issues. You're looking for more down payment assistance programs. You tend to see a lot more debts coming in. And that's been really recent, where we start seeing balances of credit cards get a lot higher. And even in markets where, because typically things shift because of interest rates a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means more money's going out to pay bills and auto financing and credit cards. And so you tend to see some late payments come through a lot more often.
And true, this is not the market that it was in 2007.
Not even close.
Right. So I don't want anyone listening to think, oh man, Ryan thinks that we're heading towards the Great Recession again, 2.0. That's not what's happening here. We're still at a higher market than we were in 2005.
Oh yeah,
by just over 10, 11%, something like that. And we're still seeing properties move. And we had what we're doing now that we weren't doing prior to that. Is these are mostly full doc loans out there. So
yeah, you have to pay a lot more to get a no doc loan these days, and you have to have a huge down payment.
Right.
So you rarely see somebody in those cases.
It's still unemployment is still super low, so
Right.
people can still afford to pay their mortgage, whereas before they were losing their job or they were lying about their income, and then when their mortgage adjusted, that's when they're saying, okay, well, that extra $1,000 a month towards interest isn't going to work for me, or now I have to pay principal and interest, because a lot of those we're doing interest
Negative
only
AMs.
Yep.
You had option arms. You had subprime lending we used to be able to lend to people that had a 400 credit score. Tell me if that makes sense.
So if you want to have more discussions on this, please text the word TRENDS to 623-AZ-RECON. That's TRENDS to 623-AZ-RECON. But talk to me a little bit about what you think might happen, because I remember back in 2007, not only were banks closing up their doors, but they were tightening up things. They needed higher credit scores. They needed lower loan to values. They needed lower debt to incomes. They needed, they started making all these different adjustments to how they would pre-qual you. So have we been seeing any of that, or do we?
That's a great question.
What do you think is going to happen?
We
there?
have not seen tightening, and I don't want to say at all. We have seen, we recently just got a notification about how Fannie Mae is going to be reviewing departing leases for properties, and that's something that we would use a lot here. For people without rental history, they'd be able to get a lease on their property, rent out their current home in order to be able to obtain a new home. Now, the writing of what was just released is very vague, so we're trying to get some understanding on what that looks like to see if we can still use those departing leases. But I think they're trying to get rid of some loopholes that could possibly help with income. And that's the only one I've really seen. So I mean, qualifying credit scores hasn't changed a bit.
Okay.
If anything, we've seen some down
more
payment
lax.
some down payment assistance programs coming out with lower required credit scores, which is good to see, especially in a market like this, because we really do need to help our first-time homebuyers. We're seeing the first-time homebuyers get pushed out of the market a little bit just based on pricing and interest rates. I'd really love to see some down payment assistance come out with some competitive interest rates, and a good amount of funds to supply our first-time homebuyers with some funds.
And once we start seeing things get tougher and tougher, they're probably going to be doing things like that to stimulate. Because that's the same thing that they did back in 2000.
They're trying to figure it out, yeah.
Right, yeah. They said, okay, we're going to make it easier for people to buy second homes, where, because it was just a couple of years ago, over 50% of our market here in Maricopa County was investor. And now, do you know what we're at?
No.
10%.
Wow.
So
That's a huge
10%
difference.
of the transactions this past month were investors, 90% were primary.
That's a big deal.
right,
I think
yeah.
we need that.
So,
That's a big deal.
I think that's a good thing, but it's some of these investors, they were just being so novice about it. They were looking at that short, quick bang, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But,
don't we all want that?
But I hear you. I just feel like there was very little business put behind it, and that the model was not scalable.
Put some paint on it and call it a day.
Yeah. So, if you want to have some more discussions about this, text the word trends to 623-AZ-RECON. Trends to 623-AZ-RECON. Let's talk about over on the real estate, like the consumer side. So I just read an article that in LA, there's this luxury home, and I think that the guest, it was on Airbnb, the guest went in there, rented it out for, I think it was like 30 days or something like that. And then they just decided that they were going to stay. And it's been over a year and a half, something like 530 days they've been squatting there. And because of the tenant-landlord laws in California, the landlord can't boot them.
That's so scary. And I just hate the fact that that's actually a real law. Like, and the owners of this property are just getting hosed, so screwed. How is that real?
It's bullshit, dude.
It is such bullshit.
They're
holding their house hostage.
I know. I was laying there in bed, because I always read when I first wake up, kind of get my brain going. 6, 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And so that popped up on my feed, and I was like, oh my god, this dude's got to be pissed. Like how does he? I mean, you can't sue him. I mean, clearly no one's willing to go over there.
And he's still liable for the payment.
Yeah. So
and his credit will be screwed if he's not.
And the house looks awesome.
I'm sure it is.
But so I kind of wanted getting back on track about trends. You start seeing people doing boneheaded things like this, and whether it's entitlement or maybe they had to do it because they had nowhere else to live or couldn't afford to go anywhere. But you start seeing things like this. You start seeing people making weird decisions, and I mean, I get it, because you always got to take care of number one first, right? But you start seeing them doing it at the expense of other people, and that's obviously where I have an issue with it. But we start seeing people. We do start seeing people foreclose on some things. We've started to see a couple more foreclosures. Where 2 years ago, on the average, because I check these reports every single month. It's really easy. I check these reports, and I would see sometimes 3 in the entire Maricopa County.
Yeah.
That was the lowest I'd ever seen it, and there was only 3. And then I was looking at it, and I was kind of reading between the lines, and they're already doing some type of buyout or some type of settlement with the bank.
Yeah, it's super quick
because they had $500,000 in equity in it, because that was the market. And so like now, what I'm helping a lot of people do, like I had this client, she she got it pretty bad with COVID. Like she got it and it decreased her lung function by like 50% or something like that. And it kind of put her in a really tough spot because she is a mail carrier. And so USPS said basically like, if you can't do the job, then we can't keep you, right? And so, but they had to obviously be very political about it.
Of course they
because
did.
she could have taken him to the cleaners,
Yeah.
right? But the moral of the story is, she went on FMLA and was having a difficult time making the payments. So I got on the phone with her and the bank, and we worked it out so that she could do a remod on it. So these are the types of things that start happening. These are the types of trends that we start to see, and it's funny because when I talked to her about it, I was like, "Hey, look, you're going to lose your house if we don't get on the phone with the bank ASAP." And she was just like, "Man, I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
I knew that was happening all the time back in 2008, 2009, but I mean, it totally just escaped me." So don't forget, right? Like there's options out there, and if you don't know them, give us a ring, send out a text, trends to 623 AZ Recon. Let's have a discussion about what type of options are out there if you're suffering from, or if you're a victim of any of these types of things that we're talking about. What else are you, before we wrap up here, what else are you seeing, or what else do you remember seeing?
Yeah.
How people were behaving when the market was changing?
It's funny you're talking about that place in California. I had an attorney I talked to like 2009, maybe through 2010, and he was out of Texas, and I don't even know. I think he was trying to buy another house, and it was such a long time ago. But I specifically remember the conversation, him being an attorney, because he was able to continually fight the foreclosure. And obviously he's an attorney, so he knew all the laws and the loopholes. And he lived in his house for over 3 years without a payment, which was wild to me. But something I want to talk about, since you were talking about the foreclosure and getting on the bank or getting on the phone with the bank, you have to let them know if you're running into issues. There's so many modification programs that have come up since the 2008, 2009. A bank does not want to own a home.
They don't want the paper.
They don't want it. And there's so many modifications that they can put you through if you qualify for them. But you need to call in and ask for loss mitigation, and you can speak with them. But I would suggest calling your wealth manager to talk about it, because maybe there's a better option for you of maybe selling your property, maybe downsizing your property, maybe selling the property,
turning it into an investment vehicle.
There you go. Or maybe you sell that one and you get into a 3-2-1 buy down.
Hell yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, there's a lot of options that you might be able to get into. But let's see. We get some wild calls when things start turning, and people lose their jobs, and they'll call us as the originators of the loan, even though we're not the servicer, and they're asking us for help, and we always have to redirect them to the servicer, and we give them the right information, like call loss mitigation, talk to your agent, see if there's something they can do there, because I think people wait too long, and they tend to get behind in payments, and they don't understand what getting behind in your payment will do for you as far as qualifying for another mortgage or anything, because it just damages that credit.
And I think there's a lot of pride in that too.
There's so much pride in it. You don't want to lose your house.
Yeah,
Nobody does.
And so they don't want to call up the loss mitigation company and admit that, like, hey, times are tough,
Yeah.
or life changes occurred. Like, I mean, pride is a deadly sin for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just throw it away. This is just business. It's just numbers. And if you are working hard and you're being ethical, then you're gonna work yourself out of this whatever slump that's going on. So anyhow, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. You just want to do it with the least amount of damage to yourself as possible, and getting on the phone with them or talking to an agent and trying to figure out what kind of things you can do, because most likely you have some equity in the property.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean. The worst that we see, though, in these times is just, unfortunately, we see people get behind on payments and build up that credit card debt. And I don't think people understand until it's too late, when they've been just putting things on credit cards, that it just just keeps digging that hole deeper.
They're so, I mean, because it compounds, and
Yeah.
they could have mitigated a lot of losses if they'd have just gotten on the horn a little bit earlier. Just from the moment that something comes up, I always tell everybody there's no such thing as too much communication. Last thing I want is a small little problem to snowball into some big, huge catastrophe, and so that's a trend that we typically see. So. If there's one nugget that you can take out of this today is if something's not smelling right, or if things are starting to go a little bit sideways with your real estate or with any type of your financial situation, get in front of it now. Give us a buzz. Shoot us a text. Trends to 623 AZ Recon. That's trends to 623 AZ Recon. Dude, you have some good stuff, man. I appreciate it, brother.
Actually, can I tell them one more story?
Yeah, go for it.
Actually, about last week or maybe the week before, we spoke with a teacher. She was referred to us by our escrow officer, which is the title company, and she got behind on payments, and we didn't know that at the time. We were just taking a phone call with her, and she had her mortgage and a car and a couple of credit cards, and everything was just building up. And it was like, yeah, what do you think your credit score is? Oh, I think it's like 720. And I'm like, okay, well, all these payments, we can save you $1,500 a month. I know that you love that 3% interest rate, but if we consolidate all this into your mortgage, it's going to save you $1,500 a month. And for her, with a $50,000 a year salary, that was a game changer for her. And
She
it would
didn't
have
have any
reset
other
her
option.
life. No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we pulled her credit, and she had just had 2 late payments, and we weren't able to do anything, and her credit score had dropped into the 500s. And so, again, I just want to tell that story, because if you're if you know you're going down that road, give us a call and let us just show you what how it can help you. And yeah, nobody wants to finance things for a long period of time, but she's in a bad place, and so she's calling her bank, but it damaged her credit, and she's going to have to wait for a few years before she can do any kind of financing.
Should have just picked up the phone 2 months earlier. She knew something was happening.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, man, that stinks. Well, thank you for the stories.
Yeah,
thank you
thanks,
for everything,
man.
brother.
Always good hanging out with
Text trends to 623 AZ Recon.
Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate 401k Show. If you want more information on how to build wealth, click on the link or text us at 623-297-3266. That's 623 AZ Recon.